So yeah, I'll just give a couple of kind of basic, I would say, guidelines in the talk. This is super casual. The slides are going to be available after the talk. The recording will be available within a week. So if you see kind of more content in the slides, given that the time, we might not be able to cover everything. So I'll give kind of high level direction and kind of my talking points. Uh, Feel free to post questions in the chat as kind of the talk progresses. As if you could prefix that with kind of a question or like a Q label, that will really help kind of me just go through them. We'll be tackling questions at the end. I'll reserve the last kind of 10 minutes for questions. And then even after the event, feel free to connect with me. I'll share information and then on the event page as well. So I'll just go through kind of my talking points and then I'll try my best to reserve more times for questions. Again, this is just one specific area in terms of the transition part. I know there was already a comment on the page in terms of like, how do you progress in the technical IC track, like, which is kind of a whole different conversation. So I'll try to keep it holistic as much as possible. And I'll also try not to speak too fast because I can do that at times. So I'll try my best to kind of pace it out actually. If at any point you have any technical difficulties, I know you can't kind of, I'm not audible, or just let me know in the chat. I'll try my best to monitor the chat as well. With that being said, we already are 2 or 3 minutes in, so I will get started. Um, Welcome everyone to this Codementor event. I am Anand Safi. I'm excited to speak with you today around the topic of how do you kind of consider the decision of going from an individual contributor to an engineering manager. I've tried to keep my talking points more holistic, just to make sure like somebody might not kind of go through this transition ever. Some of you might have already gone through this transition, or some might be kind of evaluating. So hopefully this is helpful. Just I'll say a little bit about myself, not to spend too much time on this one, but it's just I currently am a senior engineering leader at a public safety SaaS company called Mark 43. We build software solutions for GovTech agencies, specifically for police, fire, and EMS. I lead one of the engineering divisions there, overseeing 2 teams. Apart from kind of my day-to-day role, I am very much involved in industry mentorship on various kind of platforms and just connecting with folks across the globe on all things engineering, tech career progression, and engineering leadership. I also do my fair bit of startup advisory and kind of a volunteer board membership for nonprofits. Overall, post my bachelor's and master's in computer science, I've spent around kind of 11 years in various roles in technology, starting from an SDET to currently leading multiple engineering teams. Uh, that being said, today we're going to talk about kind of 4 key areas how I see it. First is just a little bit of introduction and path to the engineering management as kind of a practice. Uh, the most contextual kind of part of the conversation today, that is around suggestive signals and finding your why. I probably took the phrase from Simon Sinek, but just helping you evaluate the kind of the topic that we are discussing today. Uh, a little bit more microscopic lens on the core pillars of being an engineering manager, and then personally just making sure like why I went through this transition, and then just a quick plug for the importance of career ladders and how you can advocate for one at your current role or your next role, and then we'll wrap up into kind of the Q&A part actually. So just quickly, an introduction and part to engineering management before we dive right in, two important, very important slides. First is just this talk is about just common misconceptions regarding the topic, that you get a promotion when you become an engineering manager. On paper, yes, like you could say you are promoted from kind of a technical IC role to an engineering manager, but I am pretty much kind of not of this opinion, and I don't like this phrase actually, that just becoming kind of a manager means a promotion. And it goes back to 2 parallel career tracks, and this being 2 different roles actually. This talk is just touching on the career paths for engineering IC and engineering management. And then, as I said, the suggestive signals that would help anyone make their own decisions. Actually, this talk is not about making comparisons on which to choose or kind of which is better. Uh, I probably not am qualified, or I don't think anybody should kind of instruct on just what works for anyone else, not knowing their constraints or background. This talk is also not about recommendation, as I said, to take a specific track based on my journey. That's why I kept the rationale part at the end on what kind of I believe in and why I chose this, but definitely just open to evaluation. Just don't quote me on most things I say. And then I'm not trying to create a bias or like favoring a particular track over the other one. If you see that I give, say, a little bit more context about engineering management, it's just because since I've been in this role, say, over the past 5 years, I want to enlighten people a little bit more on that track. That does not mean the more content you see in one track versus the other is I'm trying to influence that in any sense, actually. So the path to engineering management, very simply, just to put it right, like in layman terms, how I have seen it or have personally experienced is it primarily starts as either a tenure-based kind of progression or an interest-based progression, right? Like you are a senior engineer, a tech lead, or a staff engineer in your company, either kind of yourself or the team or the org feels that you're ready to kind of get a direct report or two and become engineering manager, however soft or hard that transition is. So just like you have had the tenure and experience in that regards. Or there is just the second kind of school of thought where you are a senior engineer with a natural knack for people management and interest in fostering engineering culture and one-on-ones and interest-based, right? So that is kind of where you are advocating, even within currently an engineering role, that you want to move into people management and work kind of with your peers and manager on what their transition would look like. Here, I would make a critical distinction. In any of these two above scenarios, you will arrive at a critical juncture to take upon a formal engineering leadership role, but I see this being used in multiple forms. Some teams still call this a tech lead, where you have a direct report or two, or a formal engineering manager title. So this is kind of one of my most favorite slides coming up is I would want to please keep these separate. I know companies use this interchangeably, but I really see like, say, the tech lead part is focused on owning the technical architecture and excellence actually, um, along with kind of running the spikes or POCs and system design work, uh, while the engineering manager part is much more around kind of hiring, retention, career planning, coaching, team delivery at kind of a more holistic level, and then also a lot of stakeholder engagement. And the last point will go a little bit deep in one of the upcoming slides, but I still see or believe that the tech leads are able to code at least 50% of their time, while for the engineering managers, that time could or like gradually reduce, and zero is a real number. I have to admit, I currently am able to code 0% of my time, just given the nature of kind of my role and responsibilities that I'm doing. So it is a tough transition, and just I wanted to make sure, like the parenthesis up there, a little bit more system focused versus a little bit more people and team focused is a distinction that I personally kind of help keep it clear in my head in that regards, actually. Moving on to kind of the important pieces, really simply put, I have 4 or 5 kind of questions for all of you, similarly how I kind of went through this decision journey. Um, if you were kind of in an engineering role now, or if you were before or are now, you might have this kind of misconception. It's great if you don't, but I certainly had it in my early engineering days that I want to become a manager because it will lead to more compensation. It will lead to more power and authority. And I'm going to just give the straight, blunt kind of pointers, right? Like it'll give me the will to hire and fire people. It means getting a promotion. I would just be able to spend time kind of on Slack and my kind of chat mechanisms, connecting with people and delegate most work. This was very real for me, like a passing thought way back kind of in my early engineering IC days, right? And the bottom right label is like, it was a big misconception in that regards, actually, because that is not yes, there are aspects of this role that you probably are responsible for, but there's a lot of accountability and kind of ownership that comes with certain aspects that are stated here. And it's not exactly as how it appears on this slide, actually. So that's why I say, like, instead, your motivational factor or the why should be kind of answers for these key signals. We'll go into a little bit detail for each, around 5 main things. The first is considering the heads down time versus constant collaboration. The second is more implementation focus versus planning and strategy. The third is comfort with kind of all sets of meetings and kind of other items. The fourth is around the definition of success becoming more abstract. And the last is around this creator versus enabler mindset. So first one, I'm simply going to put questions here. You will have food for thought. You can review this later, but now, or say in the next 1, 3, 5 years, would you prefer coding 60 to 80% of the time or 0 to 30% of the time? Are you okay to have 50% of your calendars be meetings only, or you prefer more maker's time versus manager time? Uh, there is a downside of kind of becoming an engineering manager, is like you would not have complete control over your calendar, as much as I strive actively to make it happen. But there are certain meetings that I get added to last minute, or certain ad hoc conversations that I need to be a part of. As an engineer, I had a little bit more flexibility, or kind of I could plan my week ahead, knowing what are my most important or mandated meetings versus what I can skip or watch later in that part. That's on the heads down time versus constant collaboration. Similarly, on that note is, what do you kind of like doing or would like to continue doing, right? I will start at the later part. Like, would you continue to have a focus on implementing features and technical solutions versus just kind of drafting and reviewing multiple technical strategy docs, or more technical product or project management kind of work? I'm oversimplifying this just because uh, that will change in your day-to-day, right? Like, if you could, even as a tech lead, code 50% of the time or do that, as an engineering manager, formally, that will gradually decrease, and you will have to kind of make multiple decisions or be fragmented in your focus for the day, like going from a team meeting to a stakeholder meeting to an executive team update to a hiring interview, or planning for kind of the next phase of roadmap and multiple items in that regard. So you might end up becoming a bottleneck, actually, if you kind of hold a lot of implementation or key kind of complex projects there and want to continue just a technical delivery piece of that. The third one is, are you okay spending time each week on in, and it means like either all of these in a given week, or some of these at kind of various weeks. That is, one-on-ones with your direct reports, with your manager, with your senior leadership team, or skip level meetings with other key stakeholders like product design or QA departments, hiring and recruiting efforts, one-offs, that is unblocking the team. There is a conflict resolution needed. There's a career coaching moment. There's performance reviews. Again, this is kind of where you might see at least 50% of your time being spent on. So would you be okay doing this, right? And as I'm saying all of this, I'm not pitching this as kind of wanting to scare you off this track. It's great. I personally enjoy, but I just wanted to make sure like you are aware of this before knowing what you might commit to or have already committed to recently. The last two are my absolute favorite, is success becomes more abstract. As an engineer, I used to get the dopamine boost at the end of the day if my commit kind of was merged successfully, the build went green, I could see it working, the team okayed it, all of those items. Now as a manager, I really need to come up with my own success metrics, actually. Like, it's more team oriented versus my own performance. For me, it is just like the growth and morale of my direct reports versus the amount of implementation contribution I did as an individual contributor. It's more about the kind of quality of the work that we're putting out and us meeting deadlines in a reasonable form versus kind of my own deadlines. It's more about kind of just the process, productivity, and goals and happiness. So if there was no conflict, if we met kind of our sprint goals, if everyone had clarity and kind of there was no burnout or overtime, and I feel we have kind of a good outlook ahead, that is success to me, and I need to kind of find ways to measure it on an ongoing basis. Versus in an engineer, there it's a little bit more easier and clearer signals to see if you're getting kind of the right delivery methods out actually. The last one is around creator versus enabler. The way I understand is, as an individual contributor, as an engineer, I used to think like I'm a creator probably most of my time, right? I have an implementation focus. I can put an idea to practice and roll it out. I can innovate and try new technologies in a direct manner. I can kind of make coding and architecture my primary focus. I can still be a creator in some sense in terms of process and innovation and occasionally kind of the technical architecture or scale piece, but I am most probably more so an enabler now actually for a team of creators. So I want to enable the team to do their work more effectively, and I want to resolve any blockers, and I want to guide them towards a solution versus diving headfirst into it. Core pillars of being in engineering management. If some of these things that I stated resonate with you or interest you, actually, something that I would like to highlight is this was put out by Google as part of their research on Project Oxygen. It's kind of the 8 core pillars of being an engineering manager. I would give a quick summary in terms of the key pointers. That is, technical skills are important, but soft skills like coaching and communication are absolutely essential. You will see that Google put the technical part as that point number 8, versus as a good coach and empowers team as point number 1 and 2 in that regards. Arun, I'll get back to your question at the end. I see it now. Absolutely. Thank you. And then another kind of thing is traditionally, there was the mindset of linking promotions to higher level of managerial responsibilities, actually, but that does not seem to be the case recently, or at least what I am seeing. Um, I think an important point of like a pillar of an engineering manager is delivering well-balanced, actionable, and constructive feedback. Uh, this is going to be a subtle part of your role that you will realize in terms of you'll need to do a lot of writing, whether it is at the team level or at the executive level to share summaries, or with performance reviews and kind of making clear, actionable feedback for your direct reports and other peer kind of feedback that might be sought. And then the last is knowing how to distinguish the line between coaching and micromanaging. It can kind of just say like you are genuinely invested in kind of your direct reports and team members. You're spending a lot of time and trying to help them unblock with every little kind of roadblock or activity, but it can get blurred in terms of either you are micromanaging or kind of coaching. So it goes to the point about that is the feedback mechanism also goes on the receiving feedback and kind of making sure what you're trying as an engineering manager is working in that regards. I have a couple of more slides to wrap up, and I will go into the Q&A part. Uh, Personally, I went with this because even during my engineering individual contributor days, I was really focused on delivering customer value. And I was always a part of product development teams for the most part because I enjoyed collaboration with stakeholders. I started in the SDET space as an automation kind of engineer and really loved the entire product development life cycle. I really enjoy mentorship and coaching. I have been a mentee for many, many years, directly or indirectly within the org or seeking external mentorship. And I really kind of now enjoy being a mentor. I like the people management aspect of the role. Like over time, I'm building more emotional kind of strength and resilience to connect with people, help them, and kind of listen to the problems they are facing, listen to kind of the aspects they enjoy of the role, and make it kind of a culture that they can thrive in and they can enjoy. I am speaking a lot currently, but I do enjoy being an active listener, prioritization, time management, and just kind of I'm at least good at attempting information compartmentalizing because there can be a lot of context switching in this role. And then I absolutely believe that I want to hire and retain the talent that kind of makes me level up or upskill more. And I want to hire people smarter kind of than me in the roles that I'm working with. If you are interested in one or more of these things, right? It does not need to be 100% fit. I am not 100% fit in all those things I stated. I'm constantly getting better. Is it's okay to experience it firsthand and fail fast rather than be skeptical and not attempt it. You always have the option to go back to a technical IC track. I see people doing it day in, day out. Now there are lots of training and support for new managers within companies. Uh, you will at least kind of need to have a good handle on a few of the characteristics actually from the points stated above. And there is ways to now track your progress with 30, 60, 90-day plans, peer feedback, feedback from your manager or other stakeholders in that regards actually. The wrap-up piece I'll simply say is like, quick plug, make sure first there's a career ladder and path to progression at your current place. I'm more than happy to share some industry career ladders after. Let me know on the events page or the chat. There should be two career ladders, absolutely. An individual contributor track with clear titles, roles, and responsibilities, and an engineering management track. See clarity with kind of your leadership around the same. I think at the end of the day, a growth mindset is critical, right? And I don't mean growth in a bad way. You should always aim for the next title or promotion. You are either growing as a technical contributor or kind of as a manager, or ideally being able to combine both. It's important. And a quick kind of call out for distinction between leadership and management. I'm talking about engineering manager as a role and a practice. Leadership at the end of the day is key, and it can be practiced at any form and any level. I know really great engineers on my team, to staff engineers or other people who lead initiatives, who lead processes, who lead kind of projects. So let's not combine engineering management with leadership as kind of the only place where it fits actually. These are the two resources about the two screenshots I shared in kind of my presentation. They would be available for you. And we'll go into the Q&A, but I'll quickly say like, yeah, just I'm happy to chat anytime about any topics. And you can find me under my name on LinkedIn, Twitter, GitHub, every place in that regard. So I'll start with two questions that are in the chat. And RG, I'll share the info for the career ladders, and I can then open it up for any questions people have. So Arun, your question, are technical leads and engineering manager paid equally? Just to read exactly what you stated, you're talking about tech lead and an EM role versus engineers in general in the technical IC track and kind of engineering managers. Tech leads and EMs can be paid equally or even more. Like you would see kind of an EM being paid more or a tech lead being paid more. It really depends, because when I talk about two career ladders, your role as an engineering manager is starting probably in a new career ladder, if I'm phrasing that right. So you are still a new engineering manager with 0 to 3 years experience. So it will be on par with a tech lead because you already kind of have progressed in that IC track role. So I really kind of, in the companies I worked at, I know for a fact, I see compensation bands really being competitive and similar in that regards. Pascal, to your point, can an engineering manager be without direct reports? I have personally not seen that. If we are using the engineering manager title explicitly, a tech lead can absolutely be without direct reports. If an engineering manager is without direct reports, I would love to understand on what they're focusing on 100% in their role. If it's more so around team delivery, then we're talking more about a technical program manager. It's really because an engineering manager's role can overlap with some of the technical product or program management duties with a little bit tech lead duties at times. So if we explicitly use engineering manager title, I personally have seen it kind of have at least 1 or 2 direct reports. We can in a minute open it up to the group and see if they have come across just a scenario as Pascal stated. I'm absolutely interested to hear. We'll go over to one question from Rudy, that is, are there any technical tools you enjoy using for management beyond Jira? Rudy, if your question is around more information management, I absolutely do am a big to-do list person. It helps me, as I said, right, compartmentalize my kind of major items to tackle, and then kind of little other to-dos from the admin side of things, actually. So I do use Notion. I use kind of Google Keep at times, but I still have my pen and paper next to me. For most meetings, I will probably take notes on my pen and paper, absolutely. And then we use Confluence at my current work for kind of having documentation, um, just maintaining, I would say, information about the decisions we do, meeting notes, and just kind of agendas or just previous recordings and all those, actually. So personally, I only rely on mostly to-do based tools versus all the other tools that are part of my company, which I can share in terms of how do we do note keeping for one-on-ones, performance reviews, and those things. We use a tool called Small Improvements if people are curious. Uh, I'll go on to the next question by AJ. That is, how to evaluate yourself if your hard skills or soft skills are enough to be tech lead or EM. Wonderful question, AJ. I think you can do that even today, even if somebody was kind of, say, an engineer or willing to go into the engineering side of things, right? Soft skills become a little bit more primary once you are in this track formally, but in any role that, or kind of any team you are, you would need a bit of hard skills and soft skills, right? Say in my engineering individual contributor days, there were times where I had to speak to other non-technical stakeholders in explaining what was the issue or what was the fix with it. Say if there was a production incident, I had to give the occasional talk in terms of introducing a new refactor or library to my team. Actually, I had to connect with my manager in terms of managing up, and with my peers in terms of giving feedback. I had to lead or connect with empathy because I was fighting an uphill battle and might have imposter syndrome. So I think you can kind of just evaluate at multiple stages. You can go to the extent of directly posting that in your next one-on-one with your manager, or seek impromptu feedback. I know it's easier said than done, but if you start doing it more actively ahead of time, it gets easier when you go to that formal tech lead or EM role, and you might need to kind of practice or flex those skills more actively. We have few more questions upcoming. I know we are at time. I will stick around for 10 or 15 more minutes and answer at least the questions up incoming. And then I will also kind of try to post the answers in the event info page. So the next one is there an example of a difficult management story you can share that entails something difficult engineering manager might need or commonly tackle? Absolutely, Rudy. So very recently, right? I have I've teams, and I lead kind of just charter for our executive roadmap around one of the engineering practices. And what I've been trying is to delegate the technical decision making to more kind of the engineers on my team, so that I cannot be a bottleneck and not everything needs to flow through me, because over time I'm losing the most accurate technical context on uh, what approach might make more sense. So I would rather have the recommendation and proposal or the initial decision be made within my engineers than kind of me having half-baked knowledge and then trying to influence a decision. The challenge with that is, as I encourage this healthy debate and conversations, we often run into these roadblocks where people have multiple opinions or the house gets divided. And that is kind of a tricky management scenario, right? How do you make sure that people are connecting and collaborating with each other, are respecting each other's opinion, making a case for their opinion, but at the same time reaching towards a decision, right? I'm not trying to spark intentional conflict among people by putting everyone together in the room and saying, like, let's reach a decision on this topic, for example, and then people enter into long debate. But what I'm trying to do is them getting comfortable with, I would say, pointers around what peers have to say, and just making a case of self-advocacy why they believe in something, but at the same time respecting and hearing someone else's opinion, actually. Uh, I would go into the next question from Stephen, which is, how does one balance their technical responsibilities versus leadership responsibilities? Uh, I I think that is kind of what I was indicating, Stephen, through the importance of career ladders. Hopefully, it is more well documented in terms of, as an engineering manager, what is the level of active technical contribution still expected from you, right? I have been in the situation where I was a tech lead with 1 or 2 reports, and I was fuzzy on whether I should do the tech lead part of my role more or the people manager part of my role more. So I would say for the first year of the transition, people I see like are able to balance pretty effectively. That is, still take on kind of a project or an implementation piece because they have really good handle coming from the technical background, and slowly ramping up into kind of people management and the engineering leadership around strategy actually. But say 12 months, 6 to 12 months into that engineering manager role, you will see it difficult actually as more kind of things get added to your responsibility set in terms of delivery, more updates, and if you're really doing well, kind of more ownership, you will find it difficult to balance the technical response. So I'm not suggesting a magical way to do it. I'm just saying we need to have kind of more honest conversations on what is your primary focus versus what is kind of a secondary focus where you oversee or but are not directly responsible for, in either of those two categories actually. Uh, Arun, to your question, which is becoming an architect a different career path compared to tech lead or engineering manager? Uh, so this is goes beyond, I would say, the tech lead part. It depends. It definitely is different from an engineering manager, but for the technical lead, it also, I know it's different from org to org and team to team. Whether the tech lead is just a soft EM role, as I said, or it's a lead developer like a senior engineer or a staff engineer, actually, ideally, companies do tend to have technical architects for specific parts of technology, but you will see most of the heavy lifting being done by a tech lead or staff engineer in terms of the technical architecture part. Uh, I would absolutely love that the technical architecture decision making is also done kind of in a collaborative fashion within the team, and kind of through brainstorming. But a technical architect, if there is a separate title actually, then definitely that's different. But most times it does get rolled up more on the tech lead and the staff engineer part versus an engineering manager part, absolutely. Jenny, to your question, is it necessary to have previous experience in manager roles to be an engineering manager, or is it enough with the soft and hard skills necessary to be one? Uh, Great question, Jenny. You need to start somewhere, and that's why I said, right, leadership is key. Even if you are a tech lead or a senior engineer, you could start practicing. Maybe it's not possible to get a direct report, for example, but you could practice a lot of these things around mentorship, coaching, stakeholder engagement, and other parts of the role where you can work with junior engineers on the team to help them with mentorship and coaching. You could help onboard your kind of next set of talent on the team. A big part is onboarding. You will need to kind of, as a senior technical engineer on the team, you will be relied upon in terms of producing technical architecture documentation or decisions in terms of why you or why the team is kind of moving towards this new framework or migrating, say, from JavaScript to React, or like the MERN stack, or using one thing versus the other. So you will need to kind of flex those skills in various forms. So there is a lot that can be done in the current role. The people management aspect, if you can make a case and say that you would love to try kind of taking upon a junior engineering as a report, we do offer that path. Actually, I've seen in companies where there's a transition period for a senior engineer wanting to try management, where they take upon 1 or 2 reports before formally kind of becoming an engineering manager a couple of quarters later, actually. Uh, Rudy, to your question, that is, how do you keep your technical skills sharp if you're not coding each day, or do you try and code for at least a couple of hours a day? Yeah, love that question. That is my imposter syndrome. I think I'm losing the tech edge of mine each day, and this is simply on how I personally do it. Right, I still know engineering managers who are able to still do their kind of pet projects to weekend projects, still do open source contributions, and still kind of even roll up the sleeves and do the bug fixes and feature development for smaller items in their teams day to day. Because I've shifted my focus more into the senior leadership and kind of the roadmap and strategy side of things, the way I stay technical is still being involved in most technical decision making, or trying to connect with my team in terms of what is going on in terms of the technical decisions being made or the code being rolled out, right? Pull request reviews is a big part of that. I can definitely call out things in terms of kind of approach and logic. I might not kind of over time know the exact syntactic sugar if the team is using kind of a new language, which I personally did not code in back in my individual contributor time. So I would say I still stay pretty technical through my team's output and current delivery mechanism, along with kind of industry best practices in terms of architecture, scale, and optimization, right? My technical focus is more in terms of observability, telemetry, our quality practice in terms of unit testing, CI/CD, end-to-end testing, and other kind of mechanisms that help us succeed and scale as a engineering team versus the nitty-gritty of a particular language, syntax, and framework. I hope that helps. So I still very much keep up with the principles and processes on how to kind of deliver a solution uh, with maximum quality and kind of high resiliency actually, versus what exactly tool I'm using to achieve that kind of a technical output. We have 5 more minutes. I'll stick around for 5 more minutes and we'll kind of definitely come back to other questions. I will utilize that and post the answers in the event page. So the next question is from RG, which is, some companies do have engineering managers who purely work between departments without direct reports. They manage process and project and maybe tech research. Some call this engineering manager, but usually is a technical product/program manager. Thank you so much, RG. Yeah, exactly what I was getting at. I'm not saying whatever I very finite experiences that, given I worked at 5 companies, I probably connect with 50 others in my peer network, but to each their own. Like there are various ways of structuring your roles and titles and the set of internal responsibilities actually, but I see that leaning more towards a technical product program manager versus simply calling that an engineering manager. But if that is what is used and you're used to, it's perfectly fine. But in the industry, you might see kind of the overall engineering manager title having some form of people management aspect broadly baked into that. Arun, to your point, is career path after a technical lead. So yes, this is more focused on the individual contributor track. After the technical lead, and depends, right? Senior engineer, like it could be an explicit title, senior software engineer, or it could be a senior engineer or a tech lead in that regards actually. But I've really only seen 3 titles explicitly stated. There might be the system architect or kind of other solution architect or those titles, but the explicit titles after a most senior kind of technical lead titles are staff engineer, principal engineer, and fellow. Fellow is used to, like a distinguished engineering fellow is used very kind of sparingly. It's probably for the highest kind of skill set of people and talent. Kent Beck, for example, is a engineering fellow. You can look him on LinkedIn actually at Gusto. But then staff engineer is kind of the most common next progression that I see in most teams, and personally we have the same as well at our org. And then the principal engineer is the one after that actually. Mirzo, to your question, whether we will be awarded a certificate for attending this course, I'm not sure. I will check with the organizing team if there is anything that kind of can say that you had a participation in this event in that regards. Marcus, to your question, how many hours do you work each day? Excellent question. It is split, right? There are weeks where we are focused on hiring and retention and kind of the next quarter strategy a little bit more, versus then there are weeks in the quarter where there is kind of a breathing space between the start of the quarter and the end of the quarter, where we're simply focused on delivering the preset commits before going into the next phase of planning. So that time it's more kind of automated that I need to continue doing my routine engagements. But then there are peaks in terms of it, I would say start of the quarter and end of the quarter, where there's a much more focus in terms of revisiting our current plan, processes, and just outlook in that regard. So in terms of hours, I would say it kind of balances out through the week, but I definitely have, say, 12-hour 10, not 12, but 10-hour days pretty commonly, say 3 times a week actually, and then more so like 6 to 8 hours for the couple of other days in that regards. Uh, Rodolfo, your comment around you're looking for an EM opportunity with no luck so far, can share your CV and get back to me. Absolutely, Rodolfo. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'll see best what I can do in order to support kind of your search here. Sandeep, to your question, how can one advance the career without moving into management? That goes back to kind of and I think more people are interested in that. And as said, right, I'm focusing more on the engineering management track because I personally went through the transition and wanted to make people aware, but I see an appetite for the kind of the technical individual contributor and leadership track. So Sandeep, absolutely, as long as you make it clear with your peers and kind of your immediate manager that you want to stay close to technical delivery and kind of implementation versus moving into much more kind of a collaborative stakeholder engagement and people management role, there will be opportunities and path that will continue to have much more ownership and technical growth, depending whatever the role or title is in your organization. But there is ways to continue advancing careers that staff engineers also do, right? Will Larson, the CTO at Com, has a great kind of, I would say, collection of articles and talks around like staff engineer roles actually. So that is also something of interest that people should kind of look into. Rudy, thank you for your comment. Rodolfo, thank you as well. Pascal, Arun, everyone, and Jenny. So really appreciate all of you just with the questions. I breeze through them pretty quickly, but again, I wanted to make sure I can give my 2 cents on what I kind of have experienced or I see. I'm more than happy to connect with folks, as I said, right, on their personal one-on-one situations or kind of any mentorship and coaching aspects. If not myself, I can definitely kind of share your resources or tools that can help you steer towards a decision now or in future you might need to. With that being said, we are at time. So I will go ahead and kind of just wrap up. I'm going to post my LinkedIn in the chat if people are interested to join in that regards. And I'm also sharing the event page link where this talk will be available after a week, actually, the recording. And thank you so much, everyone. And I will see you around. Bye.